Well, as the Trump administration continues its crackdown on campus terror supporters, here to speak with us about the efforts and the case of Mousavian specifically is Lawdan Bazargan, a former political prisoner of the Islamic Republic and a longtime activist against the radicalism that we're seeing on some American campuses today. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just to start, I'd love to get your take on what you think of the current administration's efforts to root out this terror support that we've seen on campus, especially since October 7th.
Thank you for inviting me. The problem I have with what the administration is doing is that they are going after students instead of after the professors. The students are young or they don't know much about life. These are these professors that they give them the propaganda, they radicalize them, and they have far more reach than the actual students because they have connections between the governments, between the media, between other professors. So people like Mousavian, this is where the danger comes from. You mentioned also Columbia University, Hamid Dabashi is there, or in Princeton, we have Qamariya Tabrizi. These guys, they don't have the blood of Iranian Americans on their hands, but with the propaganda they're used against Israel, against the United States of America, and talk about colonialism and this and that, they create this hatred toward America that we see in the new generations of Americans, that they are fed with these ideas and they are rejecting the liberalism of the United States of America and the good things that we are standing for. And these are the things that the administration have to stand in front of it and get rid of people like Mousavian, Mahallati, and all the others.
Now, you're very familiar with Mousavian. Can you tell us a little bit about how it came to be that a person like him is at Princeton in the first place? I mean, how extensive is the Islamic Republic's infiltration on American campuses?
The problem we have is that a lot of leaders of the Islamic regime of Iran, right after the revolution, they were US educated or European educated. They were studying in the universities here even before the 1979 revolution, and they had created the Islamic centers in the Europe and America, and that's how they all connected with Khomeini, that later became the supreme leader of Iran, and they all went back to Iran. So they're very familiar with the US and European customs and traditions and the NGOs and the schools and everything. So they right away after the revolution started sending their own agents and propaganda to the US and Europe, and all these connections helped them create this web of professors in the Middle East studies of all the universities around, and each one helps the other one to get the job. So Mousavian came in right after the Green Movement. Actually, he left Iran not because his life was in danger, it's because they are all also thieves and they are stealing money and corrupt. So one of his friends, I guess, told the courts that he was trying to sell one of Iran's islands. So since he had court problems, he came to the US, and with the connections they already had created here, they gave him a job. And the excuse is that he has a PhD, he's a researcher, and he's helping us. And what's, more hurting and deceitful is that he is in a think tank supposedly that is about science and peace. A man who created this much chaos in the world, has the blood of American soldiers on his hands for supporting Hezbollah, for supporting the negotiations that they were kidnapping Americans in Lebanon and other stuff, and they use Hezbollah to kill Iranians on European soil. This man working at the Center for Peace and Science is really shameful.
Now, what is your recommendation to both American and European officials when it comes to dealing with this infiltration on campuses? Can these governments really root out this extremism? I mean, we know that the Islamic Republic, at least in part, funded some of these, anti-Israel encampments on campuses. How can these governments better deal with this issue?
There must be transparency in the money they receive. They get all this money from, especially Qatar. They think Qatar is their friends, and they receive all this money, and they receive under the table the money from the Islamic regime of Iran, and they bring all these professors. What we recommend in IRIA, Alliance Against Islamic Regime of Iran Apologists, is that there must be a review on all the professors at the Middle East studies of all the universities. We just found out that also like Shirin Saidi is in Arkansas University. It's a public university. University. This is the first one that we see some of them in the public university. He is US grown and studied in US, but in 2012 she went to Iran and worked in Tehran University for 2 years and wrote a book. And we see how she is supporting the Islamic regime of Iran. So it's important that all these professors be reviewed, especially if they are, unfortunately, they are Iran born or they have somehow connected to the Iran, and they have to be reviewed. Also the ones from Qatar and other Arabic universities.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today and for shedding some insight on this issue. Lawdan.